come to her turn, we might want to show it. So we went to switch from my presentation to her presentation when she speaks. Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon session on the last day. It is a bit heavy, all of us, but hopefully we will keep everyone's attention today. So this afternoon, we're going to talk about socio-economic equity for mine victims. The title is Do More and Better. Action number 39 of the Oslo Action Plan require the state party to ensure the socio-economic inclusion of mine victims. Given its significance in short, medium, and long-term recovery and survivorship, much more should be invested in a social and economic support to empower more mine victims as well as affected family and then community. Socio-economic inclusion and equity, this is something I believe we all know too well. Being active in a workforce is not only for making money or earning an income, but certainly it will be building self-confidence, self-esteem, and then increase the social interaction with other people, and improve the relationship within a family and then community. Their active figure can transform the mindset of their peer with a disability or without disability, or community people and then policy makers. As we discussed on our first day, in order to achieve socio-economic equity for people with a disability, it is now inevitable to go beyond the mine action. We must work together, hand in hand, with our national government, with a deeper engagement of the person with disability. A question is how we can do it. Today, we like to make our session a bit more mutual learning opportunity, and we also keen to learn from your input and experience. So I'd like to invite our audience to find the pencil, pen, and then paper pad on your table. There are plenty, but please reach out because we're going to use it now. And then I'd like to have a couple of microphones available on a table as well. Thank you. Today, I have very pleasure of having a very diverse panel with me today. A representative from the National Organization for People with Disability from Serbia. We have two champions, international NGO on disability inclusion, humanity and inclusion, and then ICRC. We also have three people from the ministerial level in the country, Mozambique, Thailand, and then Uganda. They are implementing very progressive intervention on the disability inclusion as their national strategy. We have our HI colleague from Thailand joining online. So when she comes, we can see her on our screen, hopefully. Yeah. And then I also have written a note for the panel. We don't want to stick to our time, but I also don't want to cut your presentation. So, but if I wave in this, you probably have 1 minute left to speak. Before we're going to introduce our core discussion topics of today, I'd like to invite Dejan first. to kindly share your insight as a victim, from the victim perspective about all this socioeconomic inclusion. So you are, after your landmine accident in Serbia in 1999, you have been working with mine victims as well as other people with a disability in your country for nearly 25 years. From your experience, can you share your thought on challenge for the people with disability to gain financial stability or independence?
Good afternoon. To begin with, I would like to repeat something that I read a long time ago, that persons with disabilities are the greatest unused human resource. It took me a while to understand that, but through my work I have come to this conclusion myself. This is primarily due to insufficient education structures, low self-esteem, and inaccessibility of workplace. Educational institutions are incapable and not adapting to the needs of persons with disabilities, which results in a large number of unqualified workers not able to respond to the needs of the labor market. This leads to the low self-esteem and fears of enjoying the economic sphere of life and people close off. There are reasonably fears of discrimination, and many cannot find a job because employers' facilities are not accessible. Self-employment of persons with disabilities is also regulated by law, with support for business development and workplace modification. Although modest, the support is 10% higher for persons with disabilities. Still, the economic reality is there. One has to maintain such activity for at least 2 years in order to be eligible. But those 2 years often seem like an impossible goal, as the taxes and fees are too high in the meantime, and many small businesses have to close down. This is why there are few persons with disabilities running an independent business. There is too much risk involved for survivors to enter the market and face the high costs of administration.
Thank you so much. All your testimony highlight all this major challenge faced by people with disability, including landmine victims. And then this is the things making more and more difficult for you to gain sustainable income for the people. I'd like to hear, sorry for the bit of logistic presentation. Can I have my presentation on the screen before I jump into the Thailand? Yeah, it's a, yeah. So hopefully we will get in presentation, and here we will have a 2 figure, 60%, the other one 3 to 7%. So I'd like to ask the audience, any guess what this figure mean in your mind? Any volunteer to give your opinion? If you don't have a microphone, you can shout out. Is there anyone? Maybe I can ask my panel. Any guess? 16%? Okay.
I'm going to guess that 16% is the total population of people with disabilities, and 3 to 7% is the percentage of people with disabilities that have long-term employment.
Not too far, actually. The 60% is a global estimate, yeah? Still global estimate, according to the WHO, of the percentage of the people living with a disability globally. So 16% mean 1 out of the 6 people have somehow some form of the impairment. But this is important to know because it's a global average. So clearly, some country affected by conflict, you do have a much higher percentage of it. And then 3 to 7% is actually excluding those people from the workforce, labor force, will be ended up the 3 to 7% of the national GDP loss. Yeah. So this is the World Bank estimate, but if you don't engage these people in your proper labor force or workforce, you'll be ended up losing your national budget. Okay, let me move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, here today, Dejan just described all this challenge faced by people with a disability, why it is difficult for them to join the working force. It is most commonly categorized into 3 different types of the barrier. One is a physical barrier, which is we are quite familiar already, right? All the building, workplace, is not accessible for people, and etc. So maybe transportation is not available to get to your workplace. And then institutional barrier means maybe access to the certain education training, there's no opportunity. In addition to the non-physically, non-accessible building, there's no opportunity. Or maybe there's no chance to get any funding. Or maybe there's the transportation, but then transportation is just too expensive, you cannot use it. So there's kind of like an institutional setup to create a barrier. And then lastly, we say it's an attitudinal barrier. So it's not about physical environment, it's not about system or law environment, but simply it is our attitude, how we think or how we behave. So attitudinal barrier could be like a social norm, perception. Some people say, oh, people with disability cannot work along with us. Or girl with a disability shouldn't have a start in a family life. Or someone with a disability shouldn't have a sex in their lifetime. So it is all our perception. We defining what you can do, what you cannot do. So these are most typically we think this is a 3 barrier preventing us to reach in the workforce. So I like to take a bit of the time here, a couple of minutes, for the audience. So please read your paper and then put in all the 3 categories: physical barrier, institutional barrier, and the attitudinal barrier. Please think of your own country or on program you're working on. What is a major barrier in your country creating all those barriers? What are we creating all those barriers in your country? And then maybe we can take another 3 minutes to think, what will be the action you can do to reduce all those barriers? Can I get the audience engagement to do something? Maybe I like to, if you have a time, maybe I can ask a couple of people to present barrier in their country. Okay, let me take like a 2-3 minutes here, yeah? I think physical barrier is something you probably can easily think of, right? Buildings, road, office, government, hospital, schools. But let's try to think of other barriers as well. Any law, system, preventing us to reach out, or any way how we think is creating a barrier. Yeah. Is there any person who wishes to share their thought? Me? Okay. I see the hand from Lauren. Please, if you have a microphone.
Thank you very much. Just to share on these very important points of the barriers, I think in the country that I've been living, the physical barriers are often very obvious. Even to leave the house, you go down a path and there's a sign in the middle of the path. So really, there is no path. In some cases, even embassies have a guard box outside the embassy, which takes up the whole path. They're embassies that have signed the CRPD as the country have they've lived in. So it's quite obvious that the physical barriers are there. And even though there are some improvements, that's clearly the case. I think attitudinal barriers are often very hidden, and people often seem to be appearing to be tolerant, and I sort of put that in quotation marks, of persons with disabilities. And that in itself hides a continuing deep discrimination, which comes from a cultural sense that disability is maybe something that's even a stigma that could be transferred. And in terms of institutional barriers, one of the things that comes to mind is actually in the rehabilitation sector itself, that people have to go every year for a checkup with a committee, even if they have lost their leg, to confirm that they are still a person with disabilities who needs a pension. So clearly this is not conducive to being able to go on with life very easily. And of course there is the situation in many countries of needing one more piece of paper that just doesn't exist, which may infer other costs are involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'd like to ask the other table in the front. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not speaking on my behalf because it's the experience of the previous speakers about the experience in Thailand. As you know, that my victims are normally in the border and remote areas, and those areas are not really accessible for anyone. So even though Thailand has a good record about persons with disabilities, but it started from the center, from the city, not in the remote area. Therefore, people who are affected by mines or a person with disabilities living in border areas usually lack of access or either physical or institutional barriers because they're not existent or late to come. So that's the first point. The second point for Thai people, the attitudinal barriers is quite important, as we have a perception that those who are living with disabilities cannot really live on their own. That's like the first perception when we meet these people. So her suggestions or actions that we choose is to change the attitude. it's difficult to change other people, but we can start from ourselves. But for the people with disabilities, we can start to get more confident and try to live on their own, especially as you discussed, or the speakers discussed earlier, to have the sustainable income and live without assistance from the society. If they rely on the society, they still feel that they need help. But if they can stay on their own, so they will get their pride and confidence to live and be included in the society. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the two contribution. And indeed, it's very important point, like it has been mentioned, right? It's visible, but in a rural area, maybe it's just been so invisible. Something in our way of thinking just being so invisible. That's why we don't see it. So that's why we are not working on it. And then all the thing is interrelated, right? It's like a circle. So if you have a one attitude, leading to the one institutional barrier, it's leading to the physical barrier. So it's kind of like a good, curling, circling. But today, we do have a fantastic panel. They will going to share some of the very interesting initiatives as well as good lessons learned from their own country. On that happy note, I'd like to invite Eufemia, to present from her country. So Eufemia, you have been an activist for a long time in your country, and then particularly relating to the people with disability for a long time. Now you are occupying a very high position in your government to elaborate and then implement national plan for area of the disability, and then you are very strong on advocacy. Maybe could you share with us some of the examples you are implementing in your own country?
Good afternoon. Thank you for your permission, and would also like to thank you for the opportunity to be part in this panel at such an important meeting. I take the floor to share Mozambique experience regarding strategies for access to employment, particularly for victims of mines and people with disability in general. Thank you as basic the public policy of Mozambique that advocate equal right for all people without any type of discrimination, and considerate people who are victims of mine and people with disability has sickness, begin different, although the Thai condition, they are people equal to others, and therefore more with the right to employment, although with some challenge imposed by different types of barriers. Regarding the question you asked me, I can say the following. In the case of mine people, victims, and people with disability, we attend a professional technique course or university course of their choice. They are admitted to public examination and are able to enter formal employment, and they chose to purpose self-employment or informal business. Self-employment and informal business, and the main project that the majority of mine victims and the people with disability have developed day to day, partly has resulted of knowledge adequate life and be attending some course in vocational training. In formal employment, some public and private institutes admit and take of mine victims and people with disability as day workers and other request candidates from organizations of people with disability with a view to providing opportunity in the face of employment challenge in general, has a form of demonstrate a positive action promoting capacity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, especially sharing the experience about in private sector and also formal sector and then self-employment. Now, may I ask the presentation file to be changed to one from the Thailand? Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce the Nantanoot, Dr. Nantanoot, yeah, sorry, Dr. Nantanoot. Yeah, so you have been also academia as well as an activist for a long time. You are the member, you have been such a key figure of the disability movement in Thailand. And then you are now is a ASEAN leader of the World Blind Union World Organization. At the same time, again, you're also working with the government right now. Maybe we can ask you to introduce some very interesting initiative happening in Thailand. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, thank you for your invitation. It's very good honor to be here and share what we have done in order to improve the quality of life of persons with disabilities in Thailand. Okay, first of all, may I just give you an overlook of the overview of picture of persons with disabilities in Thailand. The Thailand has the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities under the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security. That is the focal point for disability matters in the country. We have the mission to promote and to encourage and to reinforce persons with disabilities to have an equal access to the rights and to the welfare and to the public facilities, as well as to build an opportunity and equity with regard to, according to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as well as the as well as the anti-personnel mind ban convention on the victims assistance, right, under the Article 7. And our mission, recently we have our, those who are registered as a person with disabilities, like 2.24 million people, is about 3.39% from all over the whole population. And this number, under this number, we have persons with who are the victims, like about 700 persons. As this information as since last September, but we also taking care of them and trying to, for those who are registered, they are getting the benefits, right? We have basically the 4 major benefits. First of all is the medical services. We provide the medical care and also with the assistive technology, as the assistive devices that they got free of charge, of course. And the second area is for education. They can receive free education until the bachelor degree. And the third benefit is occupation. We have the vocational training centers, and also with the 8 centers for empowerment and vocational development for persons with disabilities, and also with the occupational promotion for the person with disabilities, training to train them to have their occupations. And the last area is this is very important to make them to be independent, living in the society and to have a full participation. For example, we provide the sign language interpretation and the personal assistant, and also allowance, housing renovation, and provide the we have the mechanism. These services has been launched out through the disability service centers, both for provincial level and general centers. We have altogether over 3,600 centers all over the country in every province. And next slide is that you will see our activities like housing renovation that for this one, for those who are the victims, we also help them to build renovate their house.
Next slide, probably next slide.
The fourth slide. And also with the tricycles, right, that is, these are example of the assistive devices that we provide them. And also with and those who, for in terms of the occupation, the employer got also the benefits. They can get the tax redemption.
Can you change slide, please? Thank you.
The tax redemption as well as the person with disabilities themselves. And we also have, for those who want to be self-employed, we also provide the loaning service for without any interest for them. These are some of the examples. However, we also have some barriers, right? When we work, like when we provide them with the housing renovation, we encounter some difficulties like because of the regulations which requires the property rights or the permission from the householders. Especially in the border areas, right? In order to appropriately have the support, they need the rights holder, the housing rights, so that they have, meaning they have to own the rights. But majority of the people, they don't really own their house. So this is according to the regulations, we need to do some adjustment. But all in all, so we think that we trying to improve our service, but our strength is also we have since.
Probably, doctor, maybe we can pause here, and I will come back with the second question. Is that okay?
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you.
No, because you just touched a very important point about housing and also accessible transportation, which is also very related to your socio-economic equity and the inclusion. Too often, I think. Too often, persons with a disability are living in a very inadequate house, which limit their functionality or their ability. Plus, if you don't have enough money, you ended up living quite far away from the city center without affordable transportation, which making you living far away from the job opportunity or educational opportunity. So housing is quite key to ensure the entry to the educational opportunity and then job opportunity. So especially for the example from Thailand, it's very interesting how to cover the renovation. So you don't have to pay by yourself, but make sure you have adequate housing. And the homeless is quite high among the women with a disability because they cannot afford a rent, or owner just can simply reject their contract. So that's housing is one of the hidden issue, but quite big. And then here, Eufemia talking about other interesting example from the self-employment and especially in the public sector. At the same time, we also noted all this vocational training and the skill training must be market-driven. So there'll be the job after you finish the training, right? And then there's a very one interesting example from Lebanon. WFP, World Food Program, conducted a training, vocational training for the refugee without disability for the IT design, IT programming. So after completing this training, all this refugee learn the computer skill. Now they can get a client globally because you can work remotely. So that would be a kind of an example. Maybe we can also explore for the people with a disability. But however, even such a successful small business could face a difficulty situation like we experienced during the COVID-19, right? Small business, successful informal sector, but there might be a bit of the no insurance to secure in a time of the crisis. Maybe I'd like to invite Agnes now about the case of the Uganda, how government was taking the action or preparedness for such a crisis, unforeseen crisis. I'd like to introduce the Agnes. She's from the Uganda, working on the Ministry of the Gender and then People with Disabilities and Children. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, I take this opportunity to thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this meeting, but particularly also to present in this honorable panel. For the case of Uganda, we have a rich legal and policy framework on the rights of persons with disabilities generally, and to empower them economically. We have the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, we have the Persons with Disabilities Act, the revised national policy on disability, and guidelines and other legal and policy frameworks that guide on accessibility to funding. So having said that, Uganda has put in place financing of groups of persons with disabilities to have income generation activities as groups, so that even where one person fails, it is very difficult for the whole group to fail. So we encourage group formation of about 5 to 10 persons with disabilities or their caregivers and parents of children with disabilities. And recently, last year, the government of Uganda put in place a law for accessing the national social security funding for those persons with disabilities that have served for 10 years to access 50% of that so that they can use it as capital to start income generating activities. But we also have in place institutions that train youth and young persons with disabilities. 4 of them take on girls and boys with disabilities, and young women and men with disabilities. But we have one specific one that only trains girls and young women with disabilities, equipping them with income generating activities. And then since last year, all the people that will have gone through these institutions, or the ones that have gone through these institutions, are given a startup capital so that when they go home, they already start to produce something that will make them have a livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Uganda seems like a testing, piloting, very proactive policy, and actually is already in action in the government. It's really interesting. Here, I'd like to have an extra question for Eufemia. For example, like while the older survivor might have a better chance to finish their education before, by the time of the accident, they might be already working or they're finishing, etc., etc. But depending on their age and then depending on the accessibility of the education system in the country, the younger survivor might have experienced a huge difficulty in accessing education and also the vocational training. Eufemia, maybe I can invite you to share with us with a Mozambique experience, especially targeting the youth. Thank you.
I can share the project development on vocational training with the support of government and the partner. The project participating Road for the Economic Inclusion of Young People with Disability in Mozambique. In this project, which had as one of its the objective carrying out inclusion activity in vocational training and access to employment using accessibility technology. This project had good result, where in a universe of 1,591 pupils, we have an employability rate of 44%, some in paid internship and other in self-employment. We can consider this percentage to be positive, but it could be better to ensure that more people with disability have job opportunity. The remunerated internship regime is seen as opportunity to enter to the job market. Sometime coming in Mozambique for young people said that is not just through internship has some good job in other way. Now I want partly the one challenge. Is possible?
Yeah. Before moving to challenge, maybe you can explain a little bit more about the paid internship you implemented.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, one moment, please. In Mozambique, we have many policies, public policy for inclusion the people with disability. We have a strategic for social protection, have been fundamental right that has demonstrated the exercise of other rights, such as health, education, among others, to consolidate to welfare, start and play a key role of reducing poverty and inequality in Mozambique. In the area of technical professional, we train the people with disability and victims men for have one job. We promote rehabilitation in the community for the people, because in our country now we have some people have disability. It's important we have rehabilitation and we have support saúde. Yes. We have, but have this policy, we have a challenge, many challenge. We have this challenge. Now, currently, the discourse for inclusion of mind victims and the people with disability resolves around the autonomy of people with disability and they produce capacity. The challenge for the effective integration of mine victims and people with disability are associated with several aspects. They allow professional qualification, sustainability of profile for the position, lack of information regarding the inclusion and sustainability of these people in the work environment, consider the education issues urban. Yes. And the very barriers. The difficulty of mine victim to access financing becomes too challenging to consider in order to grow their business. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Mozambique is also such a big country, right? It's also access to all the service in the rural area must be the challenge, I think. And I often say, women with a disability is a double challenge. Yeah? You do have a much limited opportunity. For example, the people with the illiterate is much higher. It's like 4 times higher than men with a disability among the women with a disability. And then similarly, there are emerging issue of the providing a free care. So if there's any family member with a disability at home, it often ended up on the shoulder of the women and then girls' family member to take care of them. And girls often ended up stop going to the school. I'd like to invite Agnes again about your I Save project, and especially talking about your project targeting the women and the girls with a disability.
Thank you, Keiko. The I Save project in Uganda is started with an organization called Katalema Cheshire Home, supporting persons with disabilities and mothers of children with disabilities in some regions or regional districts in Uganda, in central and eastern Uganda. And the project is called I Save. So the women were taught to save 1,000 shillings every day from their whatever means of earning. If the husband left some money for home, then they would save 1,000 Ugandan shillings every day. But then what happened is that now these groups have turned into the groups of persons with disabilities that have also tapped from the government-funded program called the National Special Grant. And they save. There are very good lessons learned from some of those groups in the central and eastern districts of Kyotera and Iganga in Uganda, eastern and central. They became savings and borrowing circles in those regions. So members save money, and at the end of a certain period, then they can borrow to start other businesses, personal businesses. But they also maintain the group businesses that for which they started saving the money or for which they formed the groups. And here, the women, many of them who have not gone to school because of reasons best known, that women with disabilities, mainly in Africa, in Uganda, miss out on formal education, and they have no means of acquiring formal jobs or formal employments. And also the mothers that have children with disabilities, it becomes very difficult for them to leave them home and go out and work or fend for themselves. So this project has gone a long way to improve the livelihoods of these persons with disabilities and the caregivers of the children with disabilities in Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is very interesting.
Yeah,
no,
Keiko,
go ahead.
Yeah, maybe can I just say something that I forgot? The National Special Grant for Persons with Disabilities is for all persons with disabilities and caregivers and parents of children with disabilities. But on top of that, we now have a grant for older persons, and it also helps the older persons with disabilities. Those who are 60 to 79 years can also form small groups and get these funds, because it is a grant, it is not paid back, and then they start income generating activities as well. And then on top of the social assistance grant for empowerment, which is given to older persons of from 80 to onwards years, for still, in order for them to have a decent livelihood. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This is very interesting initiative, right? Like all this, quite often, older people have been also forgotten too. Yeah, and then till this point, we're talking about pretty much individual approach, how we can empower this person, how we can empower this family, how we can do more. But as we're talking about this barrier earlier, even though we spend a lot of the effort, resources in the individual level, if the whole society hasn't changed, difficulty remains the same. So here, I'd like to invite Jess. Thank you so much for your patience. You waited for a long time. But I'd like to hear from the opinion, especially, you are the ICRC Disability Sports and Inclusion Specialist. And then, so you probably can share your work, especially targeting, thinking about all the breaking stigma and then discrimination through your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Keiko. Yeah, I think the approach that we try to take as the ICRC is where we work in places of conflict and other forms of violence to provide physical rehabilitation services for people with disabilities, including mine victims, is we also try to expand that physical rehabilitation to include full inclusion in society. And so the first way we started to do that about 10 years ago or a bit more in the country of Afghanistan was to start sport programs for people with disabilities, focused on team sport that would bring people out of their homes, give them an opportunity to interact both with themselves and with society, and by doing so, start to change both their perceptions of themselves and society's perceptions of people with disabilities as well. So we're talking about breaking down these attitudinal barriers and thus breaking down stigmas about disability by using sport. The way that happens is even when participating at a relatively casual level of sport, you start to see a transformation happen where people who are playing a sport like wheelchair basketball initially are feeling the benefit physically and mentally of just engaging with other people. But over time, as they become more dedicated and maybe more professional, that their self-perception starts to change and they stop thinking of themselves as a person with a disability first and all the attendant assumptions that come with that in their countries. And they start thinking of themselves more as athletes. So it really changes their personal definition. At the same time, it's also providing a very visible opportunity for people in their society to see people with disabilities doing something amazing that maybe they never considered was possible before. And that starts to open up a shift in the perception of the people in society in terms of what they think people with disabilities are capable of. So, as I said, we started this program in Afghanistan in 2011. At that time, we had a handful of players, probably around 30 or 35 players. And over the next 10 years, even though basketball is not a particularly strong part of Afghan culture, and most of the players that we were recruiting had never even seen a basketball game before, much less a wheelchair basketball game, within 10 years, we had changed from a handful of players in 2011 to, in 2021, we had 650 players in 10 provinces across the country. It just showed that seeing their fellow persons with disabilities step out of the prescribed roles that their societies may have placed on them and start to experience success and fulfillment and confidence, and the skills that they learn from playing sport really started to inspire their fellows and bring them out to start playing as well. One individual example that I'd like to share is of a player named Saber. Saber was born in Afghanistan, lived outside of Kabul, and when he was 3 years old, a neighborhood friend of his brought home what he thought was a toy to play with Saber, but that toy turned out to be an unexploded mine. The mine went off when the boys were playing with it, and Saber lost both of his legs, almost completely up to the hip. He spent the next many years of his life wondering if he would ever be able to have an active role in his own life, because he had to be taken care of almost constantly by his family. He had no wheelchair, his legs were too short to be fitted for prosthetics, and in fact, when he was about 6 years old, the family had to flee Afghanistan and relocate to a refugee camp in Pakistan for the next 6 years. When he returned to Afghanistan, he realized that he had motivation and he wanted to do something with his life, even though the standard for people with disabilities was that they would be taken care of at home and not have that sort of active role. So a few years later, when we started the wheelchair basketball program in Kabul, Saber came out and was one of the first players to start playing. A few years later, he became one of the best players in the country and made the initial Afghanistan men's national team. And since then has been a member of that national team for the last 10 years, traveling all over the world, representing his country, and with the Afghanistan flag on his back. Now, because of the confidence and the teamwork skills and the leadership skills that Saber gained from playing sport, he parlayed that into a job learning to create prosthetic components at the ICRC's workshop, creating components for people with disabilities and prosthetics for people with disabilities. He also enrolled in school, learned to read and write while he was in his early 20s, and has even started taking English classes and can now communicate with his former coach, me, in English on a regular basis. He's become married, has 2 kids, and can look around himself now and see that all the uncertainty that he had as a young child about whether he would ever have a purpose or an active role in his life has really completely come full circle, and he's not only the primary breadwinner for his family, but is a celebrity in Afghanistan for all that he's accomplished on and off the court of play. So I think that's a great example of how sport can start to stimulate broader inclusion in society. And what we do in Afghanistan and now in 29 countries around the world is we also conduct courses on career development for athletes and non-athletes with disabilities, teaching them to parlay the skills they might be learning through sport into professional skills that can make them hireable, as well as finding out what their aptitudes and interests might be. Writing resumes, learning to interview, learning to network, etc., to give them the skills and tools to get jobs on their own. We also work with our economic security department to finance grants and loans for people with disabilities to form their own small businesses. And that has created a sort of groundswell in the type of inclusion that we see with people with physical disabilities in the countries where we work, where, again, just like with sport, you start to show this example and you start to see the communities change their perception of what people with disabilities are capable of, and suddenly those opportunities to participate in all aspects of society start to open up. So that's really what we're trying to do with these programs, is create the opportunity for people with disabilities to understand and realize their full potential in society. And in order to do that, it has to be an effort of true partnership with other international organizations, with governments, and with local organizations in the different places where we work. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Just this example, like we say, this Afghan boy, he coming out of the prescribed role by society, but he designed his own life now, right? That's a great example. And then now, most of the day today, we're quite talking about self-employment as well as informal sector. I don't have a global figure, but it is said people with disability tend to work in the informal sector quite often. for several reasons, for various reasons. Simply, there's no job opportunity, or they don't have a skill set which is matching to the current job market, or they simply don't know where to apply. They don't know where the job is available. So I'd like to invite our last panelist, who have been very patient online. Sina, are you there? Karim.
Yes, Keiko, I'm here.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask you to introduce the handicap, not handicap, HI, humanity and inclusion, twin track approach, and especially area of the work you are dealing or you are addressing, targeting the private sector and the business owner. Thank you.
Thank you, Keiko, and thank you all of our panelists for sharing very interesting information and data of your country and region. And thanks, Keiko, for mentioning about this twin track approach, which is one of the core approach that humanity and inclusion is applying in our economic inclusion programs. So when we mean twin is two, so we want to talk about the track. The first track is on the person, and the second track is on the environment. And for HI, inclusion, it can only be effective and sustainable if we can work on both of these tracks, not only one. For example, when we talk about wage employment, we need to work with both the job seekers, and at the same time, we need to work with the ecosystem of the employment, which can include policymaker, employer, training service provider, and employment service centers, for example. So for your question, Keiko, on our experiences in working with employers, at HI we employ an approach which we call the 5-dimension. When we talk about employment, mostly we think about job placement, but actually employment is wider than that. We want to work with the employer on the first dimension is policy. We want to work with them on the second dimension of culture and awareness, the third dimension on accessibility, the fourth dimension on partnership, and the last dimension on HR management and process. I would like to imitate Jess' presentation by giving a case study to make it easier to understand. For example, in Vietnam, we work with a furniture company called San Lim. They have the head office in Indonesia. So at the head office level, they have an inclusion policy, an anti-discrimination policy. But when it comes to Vietnam and when it comes to the factory in Vietnam, that policy seems to be faded somewhere. So we come to the company and we support the branch in Vietnam to realizing this policy and adapt it to the Vietnam context. So this kind of work on policy means from headquarters to branch level, and from the management team down to the production and to different departments in the company. On the second dimension of culture, with the same company, we support, we organize several trainings on disability and inclusion to the management team and to the disability focal point, as well as to the head of the department, especially the production department, where they will work with persons with disabilities. And on the third dimension of accessibility, yes, so this is a big topic. I think in our meeting room today, we have an organization from Laos called DIMAS, Disability Mainstreaming Advisory Services. So actually, DIMAS is a strong local partner of HI in Laos, who will provide accessibility service to companies, employers, and other actors as well. But accessibility, we don't just mean installing the ramps or making the size bigger, things like we also talk about reasonable accommodation. For example, in HI, when we employ a UXO victim without hands, we had to change the doorknobs and the tap, because he cannot use it, so we had to change these things so that he can use properly. So this kind of reasonable accommodation catering for the person's need is very important for employer to understand and to comply to it, because it is the right of the job seeker. And next one, for example, in Laos, we have a yogurt company, very famous one, Sao Ban company. 50% of their employees are persons with hearing impairment. So the company provides the workers with the smartphone, and they install a big screen in the production room so that the workers can really see the instruction and follow their supervisor properly. And if you come to Laos, please try the Saban yogurt. It's very yummy. And the next dimension, for example, we have here is partnership. Because I mentioned about the mass organization before, so I would like to also use a case study that relates to them. So in Laos, the DMAS worked with a company called Burapa. Burapa is one of the oldest private company in Laos. They own a big factory, plywood mill factory, and they have head office in Vientiane as well. And in Burapa, they have a memorandum of agreement working with DMAS to improve the accessibility of the office, and at the same time working with the Women with Disability Association. The agreement say that every year they will work with this association to recruit at least 5 persons with disability to work for their companies. So by partnership, we mean sometimes the employer doesn't know how to recruit person with disability, where to find a job seeker with disability, and by creating the linkage between the employers and the OPDs in the areas, it helps them to resolve this bottleneck, and they know where to find the persons. And on the last dimension on HR management and practice, actually it is quite a complex dimension to work on, because when we talk about HR, we don't just talk about recruitment, we talk about recruitment and retention. Some companies, for example, like Salim, they have 4,000 workers. And not many, I shouldn't say that, some workers may get accidents from work. And how to retain this worker in the company so they can continue to work for the company after acquiring a disability is also one of the focus. So not just the new employment, but also retention. And this can be done through different techniques like job analysis, reasonable accommodation. So there are a full range of methodology available, and I really hope that from this workshop today and in the future, we can all share the practices and the approach that we have in our own organization to apply wider. Thank you very much, Keiko.
Thank you so much, Sina. So sorry for keeping you waiting for us. But that is a great example here how the HR is doing. And the HR, ILO, they have a quite well established the guideline, also the tool, and then checklist to check the organizational accessibility, etc., etc. And then everything she shared today, it's not super difficult, right? It's not a rocket science. How to make sure your toilet size, physical, and the information accessibility, it can be done easily. At the same time, engage in private sector, which we also can do more within the My Action sector. For example, is a procurement. Because My Action sector do the huge amount of the procurement, don't we? Right? So if you do the procurement, you also make one of the eligibility of the company who have a disability policy. So this company employ the people with disability. They also have a disability-friendly product, etc., etc. Even from your procurement, we can start promoting the disability inclusion, whichever the agenda, we should not think disability inclusion only for some job for other people, but it can be everybody's job. And then, in my original plan, I wanted to go back to the wrap-up comment for the old panel, but I was told we don't have enough time for that. So if anyone had a burning comment, can I invite? Or is it okay if we close it now? Is it okay? Yeah, okay, thank you. So thank you so much for your attention. And then I'd like to highlight again the beginning of the Dejan's comment. People with disability is unused resources with a very unique, diverse, and the invariable experience, and then also the perception. It could be the business opportunity. They can create a new sector, which we are not really engaged in working. So this is something we want to start putting in our head. And thank you so much for thinking about all those barriers with us today. Barriers are everywhere. Visible, invisible, but we just try not to look at that. But if you start seeing it, we also start thinking how can we break it or reduce it. So thank you so much for your participation today. I was told I have only one time for one question. If anyone have one question, if anyone had a question, we are happy to take short question. Okay, Christelle, please go ahead. Is there anyone else? Okay, thank you, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to ask you if any of you could comment on the role of media in empowering persons with disability. It seems to me that there is not that much happening. We don't see that much in the media, and so any recommendations to the group on how to engage with media more effectively to empower persons with disability, and do you know journalists that are persons with disability? Thank you.
Indeed, our representative rapporteur is a journalist with a disability. Anyone have an example? Maybe Agnes or Jess, whoever. Yeah.
Just 1 minute. That every time we are celebrating the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, we have an activity to train the media on reporting, positive reporting, about the rights of persons with disabilities, but also their capabilities. And every time we have a celebration like the International Day for Awareness Week, we have Spina Bifina coming next week, amongst other days. We have a media briefing by the Minister in charge of Disability at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development in Uganda. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we've seen a lot of success promoting, as Agnes said, positive stories of disability. And I think in my interactions with the media, I've always tried to get them to focus on the empowerment, the skill, the display of strength, of character, of skill, etc., rather than sort of the pity aspect of sort of the human interest story that's more natural to tell. Because people want to hear what people with disabilities can do. They want to hear these empowering stories, and they want to know how they can be involved. So if we can more and more get the media to report from this standpoint, that's going to push our agenda forward even faster.
Thank you so much. That is a wonderful suggestion. I think if any of you have already ongoing project, we just need one extra budget line, right? For any underspend, we organize a media training on the disability inclusion, which can be done from tomorrow. So, but thank you so much for the panel member, and then so all of you have much more to speak, but I was very dictator to controlling the agenda, but we have a lot of the great input from you. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the audience as well.
Hello. Thank you so much for moderator and all panelists for wonderful session. Please bring your suggestion for the action plan to the ballroom too. I would like to inform the next session on the cooperation and assistance model at Work South Private Public. So we will move to the ballroom too, and please be informed that we have outside, we have the wonderful product that made by our survivor and people with disability. We would like all of you to visit if you have time and purchase if you can. Please proceed to the ballroom 2 for the next session. Thank you.